my next guest, I met, I think, just over a year ago. Is that right, Johannes? Was it just over a year ago? Yeah, just over a year ago. And he joined us for our Thriving Coaches Blueprint program. And one of the reasons I wanted to interview Johannes is, well, first of all, I always love having conversations with him. But if I remember correctly, and I know he'll put me right if not, he was working on milestone 1 when we met a year ago, and he's in a very different place now. So I thought that might be inspirational for people to see what's possible just by following that roadmap, not slavishly following it, but just by taking it one step at a time. So please unmute yourselves and put your hands together for my friend, Johannes Metzler. Hello, Johannes.
Hey, Jamie.
So, Johannes, will you just tell people a little bit about who you are? Like, obviously, you're a coach and you're a father and a husband, and just tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do. And then I'd love to hear about what first sparked your interest in these principles and kind of talk to you about the journey you've been on and what you're inspired to create. Sure.
First of all, I'm honored to be here, Jamie. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm super happy to share my journey experience. And I'm coming from a very traditional business background. So I studied business. I did a PhD in economics. I became a strategy consultant. I became a manager at a big European e-commerce company because I was always fascinated, by the tech scene and the startup scene, and wanted to become more active there. And, funnily enough, I sort of had this idea early on that I was not the entrepreneur type of person. But somehow all my actions, for example, moving to Berlin and then, working for an e-commerce company, gradually moved me towards becoming an entrepreneur and becoming self-employed, which I did after being a manager and leader of business units at that company. Founded my own company together with my brother in the mobile app space. Afterwards, moved on to be more of an online course creator, a trainer, and a self-employed strategy consultant in the field of, company transformation, digital transformation. Was mainly working as a strategy consultant over the last couple of years. We're also responsible for special projects and strategy processes, and also responsible for the HR function of a big company that I was working on before. Yeah, exactly. Pretty much a year ago, I basically met you or found out about the principles via Jamie Smart. And that set me on a whole different track, I would say. I was almost thinking it almost feels like the second leg of my life, because, wow. I don't know, it's just a completely different way of living life and seeing life. So So what's different for you now to how it was a year? Because I've never heard you describe it like that before. What's different now to how things were, 12 or 18 months ago? There's just an incredible lightness of being, I would say. If I had to put it in one sentence or whatever, I have always been a person very rational, very intellectual, analyzing. I always thought that was my, major skill. That's what I was bringing to the table in all of my jobs. Mm-hmm. The one who was really quick in the head and thus could, solve problems and bring people together and structure projects and all that. And that brought, its own set of challenges with it. For example, in the realm of decision making, I was often struggling because I was just always trying to find the optimal solution to everything and getting caught up and, overthinking. I just love how you're talking about subtractive psychology, because ever since going on this journey together with you, it's just so much has been falling away, so much worry, so many limiting beliefs, insecurity, uncertainty. It's become, quieter and quieter most of the time, how it is. And I think that has brought that has brought an incredible lightness of being with it, that I'm sort of it feels like I'm floating on that. And it's pretty permanent, despite, hiccups that are happening in life along the way as you're getting your knocks.
Well, and so I love the way you describe it, Johannes, and just take us through the journey. Because am I right in remembering that you were at stage 1 in the roadmap year ago? So just take us through those milestones, or whatever your kind of mapping of it looks like.
Absolutely. So I was basically a strategy consultant in a long-term client engagement. But I was already, first of all, during the whole pandemic and everything, I was already sort of like seeing that things could change for me, and I was looking for what the next step could be. And at the same time, there was this long-term interest in coaching that I had, but that I had never pursued. But I always thought, maybe that's something for me. Maybe I could or should do coaching training at some point. And in the past, whenever I was looking at like local coaching institutes in Berlin or whatever, it never really clicked for me. It never really resonated. So I was looking at the website and I was like, no, I don't want to do that for some reason. And then by probably, complete coincidence, I was finding you via a random Google search about a year ago. It's funny that you mentioned it today, because I think I was Googling something along the lines of like awaken business or awakening entrepreneur or something like that. And that's where I landed on one of your old courses that I think wasn't even active anymore.
Amazing. I wouldn't be surprised if you landed on a dead page for the Awakened Business Bootcamp that I mentioned this morning after we changed the name.
Yeah, I think so. And then I was like, who is this guy? And then I was, finding out a little bit more about you via your website and your podcast and all that. And, I had always been coaching people as part of my job, in my teams, but not, formally. And then there was something basically you were talking about something that I didn't really understand, but I had this visceral feeling that, there's something to be seen here. That's why, I really felt, and I quite quickly made the decision to join you for, coaching training, because there was something very resonant about you talking about the principle of thought, even though I didn't fully understand it at the time. But I really wanted to go on this journey. And I hadn't coached, people outside of my teams or, in like a formal coaching session. So I was at step 1 of your roadmap.
I just want to pick up on something you just said, because the thing Johannes just described, which was like, I didn't understand what you were talking about, but there was something in it that was very resonant for me. Well, who else had that experience where they first came to this understanding that there's something here, but God knows what it is. It's like, that's really normal when people are first introduced to this. So I want to say that to encourage you, because I see a lot of people when they're setting out to use this understanding in their work with people, thinking that the key is to explain it right or describe it right. It doesn't matter how well you explain it or describe it. It's still going to be mystifying to people, because in order for someone to be impacted by it, they got to kind of see through their current beliefs about how reality works. And so what they'll pick up on is the feeling you're in, which takes us back to the conversation with Louise and Sarah this morning. They'll pick up on where you're coming from. A lot of times people will say, they'll tell me, I'll say, why did you sign up for the program? And I'll say, well, I went to a talk you did and I had no idea what you were talking about, but there was something there. So it's not an unusual situation. So I just wanted to pick up on that, Johannes. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So we pretty quickly started Thriving Coaches Blueprint with the first bootcamp. And I think one of the big things that happened there, that you were encouraging all the people who were working on Milestone 1 to just jump on Facebook and basically offer coaching. And I was a little bit freaked out about that at the time. Because I was sort of like trying to find sort of like tools and techniques to hang on to, because that would at least be, could give me some certainty or security in coaching people, until I found out that that's not at all what we're about in this space. But then it really quickly happened that even though while I was still working as a strategy consultant, basically on the side, I started taking on pro bono clients and coaching them. And I was really immersing myself in your materials from your library, from Thriving Coaches Blueprint. And thus, I guess like quickly enhancing my understanding of the principles behind Clarity and coaching based on the principles behind Clarity, to the degree that, you know, I started feeling this lightness in my life, like worries and so on dropping away. And when it became clear after a couple of months at the end of last year that my consulting engagement was going to end, you know, I had basically, compared to my old sort of like intellectual, habitual thinking, let's call it like that, you know, I had found a connection to my inner compass, to my intuition, that I didn't even know that was there. Like basically, I think I had, you know, for all my life, like pushed that away, thinking that the intellect is the master in the house and that's what I should rely on. And basically when it came to the end of this engagement, I was so sure that what I wanted to do was basically give building up my own coaching practice a real goal, like a real chance, because I like everything was pulling me in this direction. And I really felt like, you know, I had found something that was very special, very precious. And you were not exaggerating when you told me a year ago that this was going to be a wild ride. And it is. So I guess that's when I started basically getting real and really, really serious about my own coaching business. And what also happened is that one of the first things I picked up from working with you was basically that also enabled me to, you know, start with the first clients, this feeling of I'm going to be okay no matter what happens, because who I really am has nothing to do with what others think of, you know, how such and such session went, or what they think of me now calling myself a coach or whatever. And so that really put me into a mindset of being able to just experiment and try out things and just, you know, jump into this adventure and work with new clients and, you know, propose an intensive to someone and then go ahead with that and, you know, try all sorts of things that are making such a big difference in my evolution as a coach and in the growing of my practice, just because I'm just, you know, quicker in executing and doing things, in, you know, putting myself out there, as people say, because there's just less thinking about what will happen and what others will think about it. And it's just, yeah, let's just try.
I love it. And it does remind me of what Louise was talking about as well. It's like the opportunities are there. Once you can see them, you can take them. Johannes, what are some of the kind of coaching engagements, people, companies that you're working with?
Well, it turns out that via my background, I have a really strong professional network in the Berlin area, in the business world, in the tech scene. And so that's, you know, very naturally, because I know so many people there, the kind of people that I really understand and that I also want to work with, because I find this whole space fascinating of people wanting to build companies or drive companies forward and then, you know, make change for the world by a business. Mm-hmm. So I'm really, most of my clients are from the business world. They're at the level of like founder, executive, C-level, or some kind of leader in those companies. And they, you know, they usually come to me with business problems,
sure,
almost like as the, you know, first level of visibility of problems or goals that they have. But it's always, you know, this kind of combination of wanting to achieve ambitious business goals and at the same time enjoy the ride and enjoy their life. And it really, you know, it turns out the problem or the challenge or whatever, you know, is always about, you know, overthinking or worrying too much or lack of courage or lack of work-life balance or, you know, these kinds of things that are then the ultimate leverage points towards not only enabling success on the business side because they get, you know, freed up from all this thinking and start moving in the right direction, but then also in all other areas of their life, things started happening the same way it started happening for me. Not only am I feeling completely different on the business side, but my family life and the way I show up in my family and in my social relationships has completely, transformed. And so it's this sort of like business environment that I'm in that I really understand. And then people also see that in me because they look at my CV and they basically see me as having founded a company, as having worked as a manager and as a leader myself. They basically have this, I guess there's some sort of trust involved in that, where they would basically see me as a coach who has the potential of really understanding their situation and helping them out. Even though I myself know that sometimes my job is much harder knowing their situation better because I've experienced it myself, because then I'm mixing up, ideas and experiences that may be good ideas, but probably not the highest leverage points, with where I could really provide the biggest value, which is in, creating that insight-friendly space, creating connection and helping them out there. But I guess it's a profiling thing, and that works for me.
So one of the things that struck me as I was listening to you, you said it's been a wild ride, that I warned you, get ready for a wild ride. I guess two questions. One is, what are some of the ways that it's been a wild ride so far? And then the other question, which I'll ask at the same time, is what are some of the insights and realizations that have made a big difference to you on that journey? So it's kind of two questions in one.
I guess there's something very powerful and magical and transformative about all of a sudden seeing the world completely differently. I have been immersed in the personal development space for 15 years or so. So I was all over, Tony Robbins and NLP, and basically a library at home full of books of additive approaches towards finally feeling good enough. And I think if I look back at my situation there also a year ago, I was, there was, even though I had made a lot of progress and gained a lot of, from doing these things, I was basically mixing up like skills and capabilities left and right. So I was trying to, gain as a skill what is actually an innate capability that was just sort of like covered up in terms of, decision-making, leadership, showing courage, and so on. And basically freeing myself from that, and all of a sudden seeing life, seeing how our experience is created, the inside out way, and also getting glimpses of who I really am, it just really changes everything. And that's like the wildest ride of itself, like basically questioning or seeing everything differently that you thought worked a certain way over, 38, 39 years of your life. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it works completely differently. And almost no one else is seeing it. How can they not see it? And then bringing this understanding, to my family, to basically, my business, the way I do business, the way I behave, the way I do projects, because all of a sudden, everything is possible. Possibilities are really limited. I was so identifying with what Luis said earlier. It really is that way. Opportunities are showing up left and right. And it's really just about, grabbing them and not limiting yourself and what you think can actually happen by doing things. The way you reached out to me and I was also saying, yeah, sure, let's do it. I was not even, having a second thought about making a fool out of myself or telling, stupid things or whatever. I was just going for it in the same way that I was, for example, in the past couple of weeks, I accepted 2 workshops that I was moderating, and I really didn't know exactly how I was going to do it or what this was going to be about or if this was going to be a success. But just in the way that I knew I was going to be okay no matter what happens, I took it on as like an adventure almost to see what happens. And they turned out well. I learned things. Not everything was perfect, but this is sort of like the wild ride of all of a sudden seeing possibilities everywhere and really knowing that the future and the present and the future, I just know it's going to be so much more beautiful than I ever thought, it was going to be. And so there was also something, happening in my family where a couple of weeks ago, a family member of mine was diagnosed with a chronic condition. And I was almost thinking, will this understanding hold up to, the real challenges of life? And it did. And that's just that's just the most beautiful thing. So, I mean, if you were also asking me about the insights, I guess a couple of what are some of the main insights? I already mentioned one, which is this, sense of I'm going to be okay no matter what happens, because I can't be harmed by, anything that happens really, whatever it is, what happens in my business or what other people think. That's one of them. A big one for me was that all those 15 years of personal development, I tried to get rid of or change my limiting beliefs. I was basically solidifying them so much. In order to get rid of them, I had to make them really real first, and the more real I made them, the more difficult it was to get rid of them and to like reprogram myself and all that. And all of a sudden I was basically seeing like, oh, these are just thoughts as well. Habitual thoughts. So they come up more frequently than others, but I can just decide to not take them seriously. I can just decide to not, jump into this bus and ride this thought along, but basically just, let it pass. And if I don't believe anymore, I'm not good enough or I'm not ready, then I can just, do whatever I want, independent of whether this thought is coming up or not. So that was a real game changer for me, the whole way that I, related to limiting beliefs, and then also seeing through what self-confidence really is. And so as I said, all these things are dropping away, like imposter syndrome, limiting beliefs. Everything's getting so much lighter and easier because there's so much less to consider and less to think about when you want to do things.
I love it. So the other thing I was curious about, Johannes, is what sort of client engagements are you doing? Like what shape are they? And by shape, I mean, like you mentioned intensives, you mentioned workshops. How does that work? How are you engaging with people around that? What's the enrollment process like? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was considering your question about the Thriving Coaches roadmap, and I was thinking, where am I? And I would probably say that I'm, in stage 5, because I have systems and processes to enrolling clients, but I think they can be improved. They can become more predictable. They can be enhanced. And so what I've started doing is, just by basically coaching, you start creating connections, you start creating relationships. And then all of a sudden, people approach you about coaching. It's the wildest thing, right? Because people talk to other people and people are looking for coaches and they ask, who do you know who's a coach? And just by, talking about, just basically telling people about my experiences in this way, how life has changed for me, and what I'm focusing on right now, clients are coming to me. People are already, even in this, I would say I'm in the early stages of my business, but people are already referring me as a coach, either because they know me personally or from past engagements, or because I'm working with them as a coach. And I am also, I'm much more active on social media because there's something about, seeing something or having an insight and sharing from that place in the moment without having to create all sorts of strategies around it or trying to force yourself to then, show up on social media. I'm just, being much more active, but in a more spontaneous way about it. And that also creates interest among people and in my network. So they're coming to me. And then I've learned a lot from you about how to enroll clients, what to do in these initial conversations. And I think one of the biggest things for me was that as a coach, I can really, create my own rules and do whatever I think makes sense. You say that very often, right? Do what makes sense to you. And so right now it makes sense to me to basically propose different things to different people. So whenever I speak to someone and I have a long conversation about getting their world and trying to find out what they really want, based on that, I'm basically sort of like trying to decide, what do I think would be a good engagement for them? What would be a good offer? And sometimes that can take the form of I'm offering like 6 sessions in a 3 months engagement. Sometimes that could be like a 6 months engagement. Sometimes that can be an intensive 2 days combined with 3 or 6 months of working together. And so these types of workshops and so on that I did, they were almost more like reminiscence of my past, of my former way of working. That being said, however, what I'm always keeping in the back of my mind is that I want to take this understanding even more proactively into businesses and working with leadership teams and working with teams and creating my own workshop formats. But that's more like for the future. Right now, it's mostly one-on-one engagements that I'm always creating bespoke for the individual person that I'm talking to.
I love it. Well, funnily enough, I'm going to open up the floor to questions in just a moment. And so, guys, if you have a question for Johannes, we've got a few minutes for that. But I was going to ask you, what are you inspired to create going forward? And you started to mention it there. I'd just love to hear about, what you're excited about and also how it's playing out in your family. Because I always love hearing about when parents see this understanding and what impact it's having.
Yeah. So let's maybe start with the family, because I think there's also a bridge to what I want to create in the world. I have 2 young children, 3 and 6 years old, and I couldn't be happier that I found this understanding and know that this will be something that they will grow up in via, my understanding and via the feeling that I'm in with them. So, sometimes I'm trying to tell them a little bit about it. It doesn't yet work that way, even though I'm really thinking about ways I can bring it into their education. And I love what Louise said about how she's interacting with her kids. I really love it. But for example, in this instance of my son developing this chronic condition, I just noticed that while everyone around me was super stressed and worried about us as a family and about his future, I was completely relaxed. I was super optimistic because I knew my name in that moment, what he's got going for himself, his innate capacity for resilience, for well-being, for living a beautiful life, that whatever happens, at school or even if he gets annoyed or frustrated with it or whatever, right? He will always only be one thought away from, being in that beautiful feeling. And I knew that. So whenever basically my parents were telling me, oh my God, I'm so worried about you, I'm like, relax. I'm not worried at all. Like, we're going to be fine. He's going to be fine. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be different, but it's going to be beautiful. So that's how, and also with my wife, I think there's something to be said about not being reactive and thinking that your feelings are created by someone else, but basically seeing the truth of where your experience is coming from and then reacting from that place or responding more intentionally, acknowledging separate realities and basically from that place acting with a lot of empathy, with compassion, with love, rather than getting caught up in, somehow my ego feels attacked here and so I need to attack back or, create a big mess out of something that is really completely irrelevant. So I really, because I'm so connected to your mission about, bringing this to parents that will have children growing up in this understanding. And the world that I'm coming from, which now goes into the question of what I'm excited about. I'm excited about people who use business and entrepreneurship in order to bring positive change to the world, like impact the world via business. Yeah, and I think the more, the level of consciousness of the entrepreneur or the executive or the founder is paramount to what this business is going to do and to be for the employees as well as for the world. Because, I was recently reflecting on this thing, with Sydney Banks and basically how to save the world, basically. And I was reflecting on, that with a higher level of consciousness, with seeing these principles for yourself, there's no need for greed because you're not, this whole, I need more, to have more status or to feel significant. Well, that falls away. So if you are going to build a business from a place where you don't feel like you need to prove to the world how much money you can make or, how big your company can grow, but you come from a place of, I'm going to follow now my authentic desire and bringing positive change to the world, that I find amazing. So the ripple effect that I think can be created through executives and founders onto their people, their teams in those companies, but also onto the world via the products and services that they bring to the world. That's something that I'm excited about. And this is the ripple effect that I would love to create in the business world.
I love it, Johannes. And what I know for sure is that when you say that to founders and CEOs and executives, Some of them are going to just hate it. And some of them are going to absolutely resonate with it and absolutely chime with it. And they're going to be just perfect for you. They're going to be just perfect for you. And because what'll happen is, with coming from that place, you're going to challenge people's ideas about what success is and what the world needs and all of that. And I just think, yeah, I can feel the truth of it as I listen to you. I love it.